Hello everyone. Today we have the amazing Tanya Rawal here today for our alumni feature story. And so we're going to jump into a few questions just to really understand how the versatility of like the woman, gender, and sexuality studies can really benefit you in your pathway to a meaningful career. And so to jump into that, can you tell us a little bit about what has your career path looked like thus far?
Yeah, I'd love to. And thank you for having me. So after I graduated from LSU, I had an English literature degree with a minor in women's studies and also Italian studies. I took a year off to travel and also teach in India. And then I ended up in a PhD program at University of California, Riverside, where I fell in love with teaching, and I found myself doing a lot of nonprofit work at the same time. So while I was getting my doctorate, I was teaching and working for nonprofits locally in the Riverside, Southern California area. And then when I graduated, I really couldn't decide if I wanted to be an educator or in the nonprofit world. So I figured out how to do both. I was teaching, I was a visiting professor, and at the same time, I was doing consulting work. So I worked with BBC Media Action Network in Afghanistan, and then I also worked for Tricontinental Institute for Social Research, which got me to travel again. So I was in Brazil and India, and I was always kind of going back and forth in between the two spaces, and I've just finally found my groove to be in consulting and in the higher ed education world, and I love it.
That's amazing. You've done so much. But one thing I also want to know is how do you think your HSS degree prepared you for the workforce?
Yeah, so I I graduated from LSU in 2006, and um I guess one of the biggest takeaways that I had was being able to have the freedom to just like be an English major and minor in women's studies and Italian as well, and figure out how to pull everything together. And I think for the workforce, having that interdisciplinary under like grounding and that root work that was really done with me at LSU is what prepared me for my doctorate, and what's prepared me to like be successful in the nonprofit world as well, just because I have that training to look at everything very holistically. And I don't think I would have really gotten that out if I didn't have my LSU HSS degree. So
How do you see specifically your WGSS background being utilized in your career path?
I bring it into not just my career, into my personal world. I took my first women and gender studies class my sophomore year of college, I want to say, and I just fell in love with it. I learned to the first day of class, my professor, Dr. Roberts, I think said, from here on out, we're never going to separate race, gender, and class. And being able to connect these three things forever has really made me understand the world. And that training is what really allowed me to succeed both in higher ed and in the nonprofit world. So for BBC, for example, the gig that I had was to create radio content to empower women across Afghanistan to increase their voting participation and to increase their access to education. And so I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't have a very solid foundation in understanding women's studies and being able to then figure out how to take that theoretical grounding that I got at LSU and apply it. So one phrase that I always say is that the nonprofit work that I do is like applied humanities. And the way that I'm successful at doing that is by keeping one foot in the classroom and really getting to play with the theory. So it's like that balance of theory and practice.
That's amazing. And how you use that in like all the different areas that you've done within your career. Do you remember
Yeah.
every, oh, go
Sorry.
ahead.
Well, I think, I taught women's studies as well, and I always would really encourage students to get the minor because it's something that you can pull into literally any degree. I would even recruit like pre-med students to come into my classes just because there's so much to be done at that intersection of medicine and women's studies, and there's so many opportunities, and I just think like it's fun, it's exciting, and I think people need to embrace it.
Absolutely. Do you remember ever taking specific classes that you think helped you prepare for your career?
Yes. Um, so my WG, so I kind of went like haphazardly into the coursework. I didn't plan to get the minor. I was like most students, I took it as like a elective, and then I happened to fall in love with it. So I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And so I kept taking more and more classes, and then I finally decided to do the minor. And one of my favorite classes was with Dr. Henninger, and it was on Southern women's literature. That course has stayed with me forever. And then also my WGS 2500 class, which was just like this basic kind of introductory level class, but it was so fun because we had students from all of the majors in there. And I really got to think about how it connects to different disciplines at that early stage in my career. And so that helped me when I had to eventually teach WGS and think about connecting it to all of my students' different backgrounds. And then I had this other really fun course. It was called Chick Lit, and I'm still friends with people from that class actually. And I don't know if it was more the content, but it was really just like being able to build a strong network of feminists who were thinking about how they wanted to bring this work into their life and into their career. And we still stay in touch to this day. So
It's amazing how those classes that we take as undergrad students,
yeah.
we continue on to reflect back and actually use them in our everyday lives. And it's pretty cool to look back hindsight of what we didn't know then, but do know now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you would have told any of us that we'd still be friends today if we would have believed you, but I just talked to one the other day. We're gonna chat next week. So I mean, I think that's one of the really great things about women's studies classes. I've seen that happen in my own classes where my students are still connected. I'm still connected to a lot of my students that I've taught through those classes because it's a space where, you know, one of our key phrases in women's studies is the personal is political. And so the personal does come out, and we get to kind of connect with each other on that in that very personal way, and then like see how, it just sets the stage for friendship in the long run.
That's amazing. I know you had mentioned within all the different experiences that you had that currently you're doing consulting. And so I just want to know from all the different experiences, I know you've done a lot with like hiring and things like that, of what are some important qualifications that you look for when you're hiring, whether it be for internships, part-time jobs, or really full-time positions?
Yeah, when I'm hiring, I want to see somebody who has a very diverse background. And I'm not, and that can be anything. So someone with an interesting degree. And so adding that WGS minor is one of those things that I will look for, to me, because it shows me that you were, especially for like entry level jobs, right? Like if I'm looking a little bit closer at your education background. Um, what is attractive to for me is that, I think about, you're in your main focus area of study, and then you've learned now to connect it to different things. So being in applied humanities, I need somebody always to be thinking about how the world works and not just kind of have that tunnel vision. So I look for that kind of diverse educational background. And I also look for folks who've just, been able to, I worked all through college. And so, showing that for entry level folks, like if you were in college and you were also working, that's something an employer wants to know, that you probably have time management skills that we're going to benefit from. So that's something that we were looking for. And one thing I always also look for is the language. So if you have an additional language, to me, that's a really good sign, because I know that you can think outside of the box because you have access to a whole new vocabulary, and that you're able to translate complex ideas because you've done that kind of work. You've translated even just, simple words, but you understand that process. And so that's something else I look for.
How important do you think the resume and cover letter is when you are searching for these different positions?
I'm not gonna lie. When people are hiring, they're looking at 50 plus resumes. So if I can look at your resume and be attracted to it in the first 1 minute of me looking at it, I'm gonna read your cover letter. So that's kind of my process. So the resume is really important, but the cover letter is equally important if you've done a good resume, because then I'm gonna go to your cover letter and make sure that you can write, and that you can communicate who you are to me in a page, right? So they're very important, but in the interview process, that's the thing that gets your foot in the door. The rest of it is really about your confidence, being able to show your passion for the position that you're applying to, and your interest in the role. So, but you have to get your foot in the door. So
Right. You have to kind of like showcase really all the things that you've done. And so one thing I also want to ask you from your expertise is, do you ever look at the extracurriculars that students may have?
yeah, I do. If, I think to me, that's, for me personally, that's really important. I can't speak to other people, but yeah, I do. I again think like a work-life balance is really important. And those things also speak to time management, right? So like if you have extracurricular activities, like I used to be on a rowing team. If I see someone else has been on a rowing team, they're probably going to pass for me, because I know that you're a hard worker, you're a team player, you wake up early, you do the thing. So it's like, I can understand that. And I think a lot of other employers would say the same thing. So it depends on the extracurricular activities, but yeah, that is important to me, knowing that you've done some traveling, seen the world a little bit. That's also helpful, I think. To me, there's just no rush to jump into a career after college. I know we all do that to ourselves. I was just reading about that today. And like, I want to know that you kind of understand the world around you, especially in the work that I do.
Yeah, I think it's so important. One thing as a career coach, when I meet with students, is that kind of explain that experiences come in a lot of different forms and a lot of different ways. And you build skills in a wide variety of different areas. And so that kind of leads into the next question, which is probably one of my favorite questions to ask alumni who have just been here before, is what's your best piece of advice for students who are maybe just starting out or unsure of what they want to do after college?
I can tell you what I tell my own students. I've had so many students who come to me, they're not sure what they want to do, they're not ready to do what they think they want to do, because they're just like, it's an 8-year commitment or it's a 5-year commitment, and they're just not ready for it. And I know it's kind of a privileged thing to say, but there's cheap ways to do it. I did it. I lived on $5 a day in India for a whole year. You know, is travel. The other thing to do is to get that work experience if you didn't have it in college. You know, in college I was a waitress, I worked at a coffee shop, I worked at KLSU, you know, so it's like all of those experiences, I learned how to navigate the workforce, learning how to navigate a crazy kitchen. Like all of these things are going to help you in any career choice that you choose. And it helps you also eliminate things that you don't want to do. So if you are able to get into, you know, just try out some jobs, I do recommend that, because sometimes, you know, it's a process of elimination, unfortunately. But one of the coolest things I think about right now and being on the job market and just having graduated is like the level of creativity you can have in putting yourself out there, because there's applied humanities is a thing now. When I graduated, it wasn't. Like we've had to kind of make that space. And so with women's studies especially, there's so many job opportunities that folks like really want someone who understands women and gender studies in a way that they're able to advance in a whole company, you know. So there's opportunities now.
It's crazy how, just like with everything, the workforce evolves with us. And so opportunities are constantly being developed in new areas.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And so my last question for you, because this has been great. Thank you again so much for giving us your insights and your takeaways. And so the one thing I want to know is, what do you like most about your current job?
So my current job, what I love right now is really being okay, like I said, you know, there's a lot of work right now that is available. And I'm working on a contract where I'm able to teach medical professionals, so like physicians, nurses, social workers, anyone who's working like in a hospital space, on how to better connect with their patients in a trauma-informed way. And the ultimate goal, so it's a project with the CDC, the ultimate goal of this project is to ensure that women who've experienced sexual violence are not like avoiding medical care in their lifetime, which is unfortunately a major outcome of sexual violence. There's a loss of trust with the medical industry and just any industry in general. Something we call institutional betrayal. And so the ultimate goal of this is to improve and prevent cervical cancer for women. So I just love like being a part of this project, and being able to do it in a way that it's like really going to hopefully improve medical care in general. So I just think that's really important.
That's an amazing project to be a part of, and so impactful. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. I think it's going to be so beneficial for students who are kind of just starting out or just figuring out what that next step after college looks like. And I think understanding that there are so many programs, specifically women gender studies, that are beneficial and can be used in meaningful careers. And so I think just listening to you and your insight and takeaways is definitely going to take it one step further as to understanding, yeah, I can really use this, and not only do I like it, but it's going to be impactful for me and my career too. So again, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to do this.
Yeah, thank you for having me.